Hi, it's Jamie, Progressive's Employee of the Month, 2 months in a row. Leave a message at the... Hi, Jamie. It's me, Jamie. I just had a new idea for our song about the Name Your Price tool. So when it's like, tell us what you want to pay, hey, 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 and the trombone goes, blah, 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 and you say, we'll help you find coverage options to fit your budget. Then we just all do finger snaps while a choir goes, savings coming at ya, savings coming at ya. Yes? No? Maybe? Anyway, see you at practice tonight. I got new lyrics for the rap break.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Hello. Enjoy to you. This is Bryan Rice, executive producer of Christ Realization Radio, welcoming you into sacred space of expanding consciousness, self-discovery, transformation, new possibilities, and divine potential. To share with you the good news that God dwells in you. Are you seeking a deeper interpersonal relationship with God? Are you called to live in the original teachings of the Christ and embodying these teachings in your daily life? Then join us on Christ Realization Radio, programming that offers all-inclusive, trans-denominational perspectives on deepening your individual and collective divine consciousness and transforming our world into oneness. The focus of our radio network is to inspire and offer assistance to expand your inner awareness of divine presence. Learn deeper ways of spiritual mastery through dialogue, study groups, contemplation, prayer, meditation, and spiritual practices. Join the conversation with progressive spiritual luminaries of our time who seek to bring oneness to our world. Here on Christ Realization Radio, we like to meet people wherever they are at, in their awareness of their inner divinity, and assist them in various ways by offering classes and study groups, discussion groups, doing one-on-one mentoring, and more. This network is dedicated to the expansion of consciousness. We hope to be channels of peace for you, and we hope to inspire you to become channels of peace in the world. This network is going to continue being a vehicle and a mustard seed, growing big as we expect great things. But we need you to be a part of that with your faithful listenership. Through your support, through your calling in, learning and engaging in a dialogue, taking part in all this network has to offer. We hope you will walk the path with us, growing in higher awareness about your true divine nature, the Christ, or the Buddha self, or whatever you call the divine God self within. Thank you for your openness and your willingness. Our goal is to lift you up and help you realize your divine potential and true identity in the divine. You are listening to Christ Realization Radio, where you will discover the reality and the essence of your presence. With programs brought to you by Project New Humanity Communications. You are listening to Turning Points and Transformations with your host, Bryan Rice. Will today be the day that you have your breakthrough in consciousness? It is time to be uplifted. Welcome and joy to you. This is a rebroadcast of a 2012 episode from the Way of Consciousness Radio Network. The Great Compassion Diksha. In my hours of need, I turn to the Great Compassion, the immortal allness that resides in my deepest self, the true self within. When I find it hard to forgive, whether in the form of ignorance, backbiting, malicious behavior, or hatred of any kind that is directed toward me, I yield myself to the loving divine indwelling, seeking the strength to forgive others whom my ego feels has wronged me. In these times, I seek always to release and dissolve any associated negativity that arises in my heart space, in the center of my chest. I seek to embody the compassion divine in all my daily activities, and again in those moments where love is put to the test by any separative, unconscious projections from other individuals. Ultimately, I must join my life in consciousness with all of humanity and all of creation. I extend myself in my heart in kindness and consideration, and commit myself to becoming love, the most real thing there is. Any emotion not experienced or shared in love is born of fear, and ultimately illusion in Maya delusion. I become compassion with each breath I take, and release all blockages to the awareness of love's presence in my soul as I exhale. As my capacity to love grows, I radiate the light transmission of the Sacred Heart of Christ consciousness, traveling the middle way, walked by Buddha, where compassion leads me, feeds and nourishes my soul and the souls of others. I engage in the great love affair in the divine romance dance, uplifting my heart in union with the divine intimate God who embraces me this day and every day, covering whatever cold withholding may be preventing me from being the genuine true identity of the I Am presence, with a thick, warm blanket of unconditional agape love. I center all of my prayers on the very idea of love now, as I am infused by light and am comforted as well as freed from the torment caused by personally held grievances or limited perceptions. I am loved. I am love. I will be love. And so it is. Just a quick note. If you enjoyed that Diksha meditation, the Great Compassion Diksha, You can find more just like it at bryanrice.org, where there is music and meditations in a store that you can buy, download, and get your hands on. Here's the show from 2012. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Turning Points and Transformations. This is Bryan Rice welcoming you. Hope you had a happy holiday and an upcoming new year. I wish you a happy one as well. So, what are we going to talk about today? The gravity of loss. Now, I know it doesn't sound like an uplifting topic, but it's a very real topic, a very, very dense and also very pertinent topic. I want to talk about my wife's journey a little bit and her breakthrough moments that she's had, as we do on Turning Points and Transformations. Talk about breakthrough moments, turning points in your life, in people's lives. Usually I share things that happened in my life, but I want to share what has gone on in my wife's life to permit growth and also release from grief. Grief is something that troubles the heart. Grief is a form of anger, a form of sadness. Grief is a form of suffering. We all can experience it in our own ways, but we all do experience it in multiple ways, whether it's the death of our false self, or the death of a loved one, the death of somebody that we care deeply about. You know, I couldn't imagine being exactly in my wife's shoes. My wife's name is Michelle, and she's a wonderful woman who does a lot of things for a lot of people. She's a helper. It's her nature to want to help people when they're in distress and take care of people when they're sick. And she's done that. And she's phenomenal. She's got a phenomenal strength because of that. I suffered a great loss as well as she did, not as nearly as great as she did, but I lost my father-in-law a year ago, December 22nd, 2011. And we lived with him for 7 years upstairs. And it was a situation like similar to the King of Queens, and it was a cross between the King of Queens and All in the Family, in the way things were, the way things went around here. But it was very interesting to say the least, and we had an interesting living arrangement. And I had the fortunate experience of getting to know very well Bob Frasca, who I talked about in the first episode of the series, When Will You Have Your Breakthrough Moment, where I shared my breakthrough moment of being able to help take care of Bob when he was in his sickest state, when he was suffering the most, near the end of his life. And there was no question in my wife's mind. She didn't think or have to think twice about leaving her job to take care of her parents, both her parents who have passed away. She did it for her first parent, and she did it, which was her mom, obviously, and then she did it for her father. And I helped as a caregiver with her last year. But in terms of the gravity of loss, my wife's had the fortunate experience of reflecting on her experiences of loss. She's lost her whole immediate family. She's lost her mom, her sister, and her father. And she's only 37, going to be 38 in a couple weeks here. And the reality is, most of her extended family has passed away too. And the extended family that she does have, she's not close to, which are a lot of cousins and second cousins and so on and so forth. On her mom's side, and many of her relatives on her mom's side have passed away as well. like aunts and uncles. So, and also on her father's side, she's lost many of her aunts and uncles as well. There's 2 remaining out of 13. Yes, it was a big Italian family. And my father-in-law, Bob, he passed away with an older brother still being alive, 10 years older than him. And it was really hard for his brother. So the gravity of loss was great for his brother Louis, who I still see and know very well. The gravity of loss affects everybody. Last year it was right around Christmas time, as I said, December 22nd, when Bob passed away. But prior to that, like I said, my wife was taking care of him and I assisted in that. She did leave her job, as she did with her mother, left her job to take care of her parent full time. And that's commendable. I think not a lot of people would do that. But there are a lot of people who would too. And my wife's one of those people. And she had to, in her return to schooling in her master's degree studies, had to do an assignment with a family sculpture. And it really hit hard for her when she did her immediate family sculpture. And she asked me to draw a picture for her of her staring at the grave site where they're all buried. And that's when it became more real for me, when I really started to understand what Michelle was going through and what she has gone through in this past year. Now, I'm not aware entirely of the grief cycle, but I do know that anger is a big part of that. And she felt a lot of anger for a long time. And living with that anger, I was sometimes not the source of it, but I was sometimes the receiver of that anger. And it's hard not to take things personally, but when somebody is experiencing loss and grief, and they're suffering, and they're angry, they have to release it. They have to release the pain. There's lots of ways in Kundalini Yoga to release anger, inner anger. We're not going to talk about that today, but we will in upcoming shows. I think it's a good topic, and there's some kriyas and there's some exercises that can be done to help alleviate inner anger. But I just wanted to continue to reflect on that, how heavy grief can be, how heavy loss can be. It creates a certain density, heaviness in one's being, not in the infinite being, but in the finite being, in the limited being. Because nobody can die, ultimately, in reality. Nobody, I believe, in my opinion, is condemned to a life of afterlife of suffering. I believe that we do our suffering here in this world and it's self-created in many times. And I can say that a lot of anger and hurt that my father-in-law experienced near the end of his life was self-created. He was experiencing the gravity of loss as he had lost his wife and his daughter, his first daughter. And he was reminded of that every day. So I believe that energetically, a lot of things were going on for him. He was experiencing that heaviness of grief for years. And it led to, ultimately, the breaking down of his body. his anger about his loss consumed him deep down inside. At the most basic level to the most complex level. And he had to carry the burden, the memories. Not the memories or burdens, but the burden of not having those people in his life anymore. And my wife experienced the same thing as she did with the loss of her mother and the loss of her sister. Now I can say I didn't know Michelle's mother, and but I know she took it very hard, and her mother suffered. And so when we see people suffer, that too can take a toll on our psyches. And it's hard not to let it affect us. Michelle's sister died tragically in an accident. Not a car accident, but something more. It was immediate, unexpected, and that, I think my wife was on autopilot for that time period, but she made it through it. She was a strong person. She was a strong person through her mother's funeral planning and everything like that. Bob, her dad, was stricken with grief, as I mentioned, and he couldn't take care of the arrangements for his wife's funeral and his daughter's funeral. He was too grief-stricken. It took a toll on his system. It challenged his spirit to rise up for the spirit to prevail. He had many fond memories of both his wife and his daughter, Glory. And he shared many stories with me about them. There was always a great joy when he spoke of them, but there was always the sadness as well, even years after, even 5-10 years after the loss of his wife. When we see people suffering, we can't help but suffer with them. We can't help but to feel what they feel, to weep when they weep. And we should weep with those who weep. Not just because one of the most enlightened masters on this earth, Yeshua Jesus, said to do that, but because it honestly is one of the greatest acts of love. One of the greatest acts of love one can cultivate, one can bring to a situation or to a relationship. Now, my wife had a turning point, and her turning point was when she had to do that family sculpture. And then we do a reflection paper about the element of loss in her life. And she was able to, in her own way, to work through her grief. She reflected upon the element of loss in her life and how it's shaping her practice and her awareness as a social worker, and what she wants to do and continue to do in her work, which is work in medical social work. And she's going to be fantastic at it. She already is fantastic at it. She has a knack for working with older populations, and I've seen her in action. It's been a tough year for all of us, tough year for everybody in this world, in this nation. There's not a lot of jobs out there. There's a lot of people who need to eat. And the test of time has begun to be more of a prominent thing in our lives, in the life of my wife and myself, as I do my teaching and ministry. She's going to school now full time, finish up her master's, but she's been unable to find work for over a year and a half now. And it seems like everything these days is requiring a master's degree for especially social work. Excuse me. But she's getting very valuable experience in having time to self-assess her situation, her relationship to loss, the gravity of loss, as she's now going to some therapy sessions and talking about that very thing, that very theme, loss. So many of us have to deal with it and have dealt with it. We do it in our own ways, and it's not a rubber stamp process. There's no textbook on how to process grief, even though there is a grief cycle, and people can, in the professional counseling worlds, they use that model to help counsel people who are suffering grief. And it's good to understand, especially as a person who's going through it, to be self-reflective, to be cognizant of one's inner struggle to overcome and to heal, ultimately to heal. But getting back to my wife, Michelle, she did that sculpture. She told me what she wanted to draw, what she couldn't do. Not because it was too painful, but just because she couldn't get it out of her head the way she wanted it. And I drew it for her, and she used it to help complete her paper on the topic and how her family sculpture, so to speak, has informed her practice as a social worker. And she processed everything objectively. I think it was a very necessary part of her healing process and her ongoing healing process. She's stronger for it. She's more self-aware. Her feelings and emotions are heightened. And she's more attuned to the inner life within her as a result. I think she had a breakthrough in being able to say that she wanted to process her grief with somebody else. It's hard to do with somebody you care about, such as your spouse. You can only share so much, but when you have an objective person, such as a therapist, you can work through things and talk about things in an impersonal way that allows you to distance yourself somewhat from what you're experiencing. And it was for the better. It was for a very good purpose that she chose to go into some counseling. The gravity of loss as a universal theme is something we're going to continue to deal with through our lives. People come and go, not just in death, but in relationships. Some friendships end, or people lose ties, lose touch with each other. And in that process, there is a grief. We suffer the loss of a relationship that may have been very strong. I know personally I have several friends who I've lost touch with. Some due in part to my own doing. Some just due to circumstances. And even in this world of interconnectivity, where we're able to connect with people all the time, it's still very easy to lose touch with people you really cared about and were close to. I can think of multiple friends whom I haven't spoken with in years. And many of my friends, many of the people I surround myself with in my life are much older than I am, more experienced in life. And I'm grateful for their presence, but I don't spend a lot of time working on the relationships that I had and sustained with in my youth and in my teenage years and in my 20s and now in my 30s. I have allowed distance to be put between me and these people that were very big parts of my life. So we can suffer the gravity of loss in friendships. Not all last throughout time. Want to continue to grow, want to continue to offer inspiring programs that cause us to think about our life processes, about our struggles as well as our victories. And we can talk about victory in the sense of loss, and how, in the context of loss, how can one become victorious over that phenomenon of loss? And that's what we'll do in the remaining part of this program. As I was saying, my wife had a turning point, and she had a breakthrough moment. And she was able to process through her paper, through her assessment of herself, in the scope of her life and her practice as a social worker, how the care for her family members during their times of illness, and also the role that she played in their lives and the end of their lives and after their lives had expired. She gained great insight into her pain, about her pain. And though she would in an instant have her family back if she could, I know that she's ultimately made a lot of progress. A lot of progress. And I've seen her grow. I've seen the stages of grief play out. And she's in a lot better place this year, a year later, after the loss of her father, who she was very close to. we all need to process pain. We need to process loss. And again, as I was saying earlier, sometimes it's good to have somebody objective to do that with. But it's also good to have somebody to cry with. And the process itself, it's challenging, very challenging. And we don't wish or want to wish loss on anyone. But people become stronger because of the experience of loss. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And so we try to keep in perspective the meaning of human relationships. We try to keep in perspective while people are alive and while we have them now in our lives, what they mean to us. We should really validate. People who have experienced loss tend to not take for granted the people that they do have in their lives. I know my wife, just in this Christmas card that she gave me the other day, or yesterday, said I'm her family now. And that really touched me very deeply. And that she ultimately wanted to grow old with me and spend her time growing and processing and living the high quality, the high caliber. It's not the end of the world when we lose someone. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. And this is going to sound somewhat strange, maybe to you, but we have to relinquish our attachments to our fellow human beings in order to truly be free. Sometimes what we call love is really attachment to people, to the idea of love. I'm not here to bash love, to bash human relationships. But in our lifetime, even with the people that we care about, we need to relinquish our attachment to those people. So, when we do lose them, we're not as stricken. We're not as paralyzed or crippled by the pain of their loss, or the loss of them. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be loving or shouldn't love our family and friends, but we just need to relinquish attachment to those people and love them for who they are, what they are, for their eternal selves, in the almighty divine plan, in their divine alignment, in their alignment with the divine, the unified field of God life, or the infinite, whatever you choose to call it. Human relationships are a very rich, deep, and meaningful thing. And I'm not here to demean them in any way. But when we let a person go, even though it's a scary thing to do, we have to let that person go. We have to let that being, that spirit go. And allow the person, the personality of the person we loved to expire. We'll always have the memories of the people we shared our lives with. And those are cherished things. But we can alleviate our suffering and alleviate our loss. The degree of our loss, not the loss entirely, but in the mending and healing process, it requires conscious letting go. Conscious letting go of our attachments to the people in our lives. And I don't think my wife's in a position to do that at this time. Still too soon with the loss of her father. Even it being a year ago, she was close to him. Very close. And now she says she's only got me to rely on, even though she does have other people in her life, other friends. But even in our relationship to one another, we can't entirely be attached to one another in a way that's unhealthy, where we need each other. We can uplift each other, help build each other up, hold each other up, support one another emotionally, spiritually. But we can't rely on one another. We can ease our pain now by being aware of our attachments to other human beings. And it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to admit that we need to let go of some of the immensity, so to speak, of attachment. We absolutely, without a doubt, need to distinguish and decipher the difference between attachment and love. Attachments cause us to suffer greatly. Love we know is eternal. We're connected with the truth of love, or the Satnam, the true identity of love. People live on in our hearts. We can be attached to memories, and that's okay to a certain extent. But we need to live in the now. And we need to recognize in our lives when we're in relationship with other people, our attachment, or level of attachment, or lack thereof, that we have with certain people. It's the only way. Not to protect ourselves, but it's the only way to travel the path of true love, is to know the difference between attachment and love. And there's ways to do that. when we recognize that there is neediness in it, in a relationship, or a codependency, or reliance on a certain person for certain affirmations and or confirmations of identity, and self-concept. Even for things such as acceptance. Being in alignment with the divine unified field of God, of being, of presence, is the only way to be free from the pain caused by attachments that we seemingly lose or feel like we lose when somebody passes on or when a relationship ends. Life does go on. And as I said, memories live on. But we can be attached to memories. And even the people that we love in their passing want us to live in the present, want us to remember them. For the good things they did and the good things that made them who they were as a person or a personality. But they'd much rather, I'm sure, in their after-death state, in their eternal immortality, want us to live on, knowing that their true self has never died, that their true self could not be killed. That their life force, in essence, lives on. Not just in our memories, but in eternity. So, breakthrough moments require recognizing where these attachments are. And then we can begin to deal with the gravity of loss. The density of loss. It's not easy to separate yourself, to be objective in times of grief. But ultimately we have to let the memory, or to let the attachments go. It's easier said than done. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's program. And hope you come back again next week. Here on Turning Points and Transformations. I want to hear from you. Subscribe to the feed. Love to have you as a continued listener. And I want to thank you for your support in the archive listening to on demand. Well, I hope you all had a very blessed holiday. I hope you have a happy new year. And pray that the resolutions you make and the promises and intentions you set out to attain or to see realized in your life come to fruition. Ultimately, pray for your peace, your comfort, your joy in the coming new year. This is Bryan Rice thanking you, blessing you, sending you out back into the world. Peace. Just one final thought to leave you with. Please check out my website, bryanrice.org. That's BRYANRICE.org, where you can find information on how to buy and how to get your hands on some music that has encompassed my journey, that has been a reflection of my journey, as well as meditations and affirmations set to music that are uplifting and meant to empower. Thank you.
In eternity, refined like gold, transcendent praise, shine down from above, the Almighty One. I'm a child of the light in the school of life. Ecstasy, especially unperishable light, has perfected me to the point where my head and my heart work as one in unison. Thanks to my God, from whence I've come and to whom I return. I dance with my dogs to the beat of the holy sound. That fire arrived unmediated to me, infused with grace, illumination in me. I am full of peace, not afraid of what lies ahead. This gift to my heart, overflowing joy. It's just God's way of loving us, revealing the way. Ecstasy, especially unperishable light, has perfected me to the point where my head and my heart work as one in unison. Thanks to my God, from whence I've come and to whom I return. I awoke from the dream of the hell that I made, 'cause the light is alive and I feel only bliss. Now I need to share this gift with the world. I realize who I am. Now I must lead a flock to the land of milk and honey, that taste and a glimpse, beatific vision in the burning bush. Well, in exile, so sweet, I could cry. Oh! Ecstasy, especially unperishable light, has perfected me to the point where my head and my heart work as one in unison. Thanks to my God, from whence I've come and to whom I return. Ecstasy, especially unperishable light, has perfected me to the point where my head and my heart work as one in unison. Thanks to my God, from whence I've come and to whom I return. Sing with me. Ecstasy, especially unperishable light, has perfected me to the point where my head and my heart work as one in unison. Thanks to my God, from whence I've come and to whom I return. There is illumination in self-realization. that you are a beloved son and daughter of God.
May the divine bless you, uplift you, and keep you. Om. Shanti. Peace. Amen. You have been listening to Turning Points and Transformations with Bryan Rice. We hope you have enjoyed your program today. Together, let us help build the new humanity and seek to become one with the divine presence of all there is.